All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm not really doing much of a decode today. I wanted to have more of a discussion with you, Nando, about Biden's infrastructure bill. So let me present some of what I'm seeing lately, and then I want to get your thoughts because there's a growing narrative regarding the necessity or the lack of necessity for a more robust infrastructure bill. Now, to be clear, there are huge flaws with the infrastructure bill, which we will get into when we have a discussion with Seth Ackerman later. But for now, I want to talk about what the plan of attack is from both the corporate media and from corporatists overall. And this narrative just really became apparent recently. So the new jobs report indicates that the economy added nearly 1 million new jobs last month in March. So the exact number is 916,000, which was the largest job gain since August. And so you see all the celebratory reports. But unfortunately, some are using these new jobs numbers to argue that, hey, maybe we don't need Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure bill, especially since his selling point is that it would create new jobs. Do we really need this help in creating new jobs when we see that the economy is already doing really well? Now, let me give you the details on where the economy is at right now, but more importantly, also give you the reality of where the economy was at pre-pandemic. Now, the unemployment rate dropped from 2.6% to 6% in February. Unemployment among African Americans and Latinos remained elevated at 9.6% and 7.9% respectively. And the gap with whites narrowed in March. Unemployment among Asian Americans rose to 6% from 5.1% in February. So clearly the unemployment rate did improve with some groups, but unfortunately it became worse with other groups. But you know, the way that the jobs report is reported on, usually it doesn't really give you much of a nuanced look at what type of jobs these are. Are they full-time jobs? Are these people who are going to be underemployed? That's an important thing to keep in mind as we keep getting more and more of this data. Now, again, the jobs report, as unnuanced as it is, was better than most economists expected. And, you know, they did celebrate this. The unemployment rate, though, before the pandemic hit was 3.5%. And so for anyone who's trying to sell this as a coronavirus pandemic recovery is just flat out lying to you, because if you look at the unemployment rate now, it's at 6%. Right. And if you look at this fun graph put together by NPR with data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, you'll see that in February of 2020, the unemployment rate was at 3.5%. At the height of the economic collapse related to the pandemic, it was 14.7%. And right now we're at 6%. But again, I need to reiterate that jobs numbers or the unemployment numbers are really, really deceptive when you consider the unemployment question. And we'll get into that in a little more detail in just a minute. Now, there are still 8.4 million fewer payroll jobs in the United States now than there were before the coronavirus took hold a year ago. So clearly, we have not experienced a full recovery. But the media is framing things in interesting ways when considering Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure proposal, which, of course, we learned the details of this week. So here's how it was framed on CNN.
Economists are forecasting continued growth, even a boom going into the summer. And I wonder, if the economy is set to boom, why the need to inject another $2 trillion in via this large infrastructure proposal?
Well, thank you, Jim. Yes, these were encouraging numbers. It suggests that the speed with which we have accelerated the vaccination rollout and getting shots into arms, and just the confident economic structure that the Biden administration has put in place has really provided the confidence that the economy needs to start to get going again. But we still have more work to do.
So I kept her answer in there just to give her an opportunity to answer the question. But really, at the heart of what I want you to focus on was just the framing of that question. Well, it looks like the economy is improving. So why would we need an infrastructure bill? Everything was great before the coronavirus pandemic. So why would we need an infrastructure bill? That's really the growing narrative that you're likely to notice if you're paying any attention to corporate media. Let's move over to Politico, which had this headline recently: Biden's spending plans collide with a resurgent US economy. And of course, the subheadline: the numbers signal the United States is well on its way toward revival, one that's widely expected to reach record levels of growth later this year. So again, the message that's being implied there is, why would we need to spend $2 trillion on infrastructure? Why would we need to create government jobs when the economy is doing great? It's booming, it's roaring back, everything is fine. Just to read a little from the piece that Politico put out, they write that President Joe Biden is pitching his $2 trillion infrastructure proposal as the largest American jobs investment since World War II, a plan that will put millions of people back to work as the country emerges from the coronavirus crisis. The economy, meanwhile, is showing signs of recovering on its own. On its own, guys. What are we doing? What is Biden doing? Further, they write that pitching trillions more in spending as necessary to bring back jobs could become a harder argument to make as the economy looks poised to get there on its own. And I want to be clear that this is not an op-ed in Politico. This is supposedly a straight news story with no opinion injected, which is hilarious. We're also hearing more about the need to target the spending, which you should also keep in mind, because targeting usually means pushing for programs or provisions that are not universal, that are not permanent. And so for anyone who claims that Biden's proposal is, similar to the New Deal is honestly delusional. But more importantly, if you do in the future, especially in the second half of the proposal that hasn't come out yet, have programs that are universal and are permanent, well, this is the kind of talking point that you're likely to hear. So Representative Kevin Brady said this: spending at a much smaller level, but better targeted, would have better bang for the buck. We're wasting far too much of these dollars in areas that frankly aren't related to the recovery. So Nando, I want to bring you in because there is this, as oftentimes we see with capitalists, this conflict in what their interests are. On one hand, you have this need to cut taxes, right? That's really at the heart of the argument here. They're not saying it outright, but they don't want tax increases to pay for this program. At the same time, though, if you care about commerce and if you want to protect the system of capitalism, how do you do that with a crumbling infrastructure, right? So obviously there's a giant conflict there. And it's, again, I'm not talking about this as if Biden's proposal is fantastic. We're going to talk about its flaws when we have Seth Ackerman on. But to attack this as something that's completely unnecessary, I think is delusional.
Yeah, I mean, it's the argument you're seeing from the business class. I was looking at the response from some of the trade groups and things like that. Is that we like the infrastructure spending in theory. We like it. We need better roads, bridges, all that stuff. Airports could be better. Everything that is in that bill we want and could use. The problem is that we don't want the corporate tax increase. We just don't want increases on our taxes to pay for it. And then it's like, well, then how do you pay for it? And what they say, and this is what like everyone made fun of Pete Buttigieg for, is that you do kind of these like usage taxes. The people who benefit from these infrastructure things should be the ones that pay for it. Like you do like some sort of gas mileage tax or, toll booths and things like that. A regressive tax that falls on regular people. This is what, that Pete Buttigieg thing that came out, was it like this week or the week before, where he was like, yeah, I actually support this, blah, blah, blah. And everyone like laughed at him because, he's just the biggest nerd in the world. But yeah, that's what it is. It's like they want the benefits. They want the benefits of the state to protect their business interests, to help, smooth the flows of commerce from one side to the other, but they don't want to pay for it. They want other people to pay for it, meaning us, regular people.
And really, that's been the play for quite some time now, right? Public investment in what these like executives and what these businesses get to take advantage of, right? A lot of public investment, especially in research and development, which all of a sudden you're seeing people like Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, come out and be like, oh, there's funding here for research and development. Yeah, the taxpayer actually pays for the research and development for a lot of private companies, including pharmaceutical companies, because private investors don't want to take on that risk. We as US taxpayers tend to take on that risk. And then oftentimes, especially with pharmaceutical companies, they'll turn around and price gouge us. So that's how this system has been functioning. So, you have the corporate is coming out and basically saying, without saying it explicitly, why don't we just keep doing what we've been doing? Like, why don't we just have ordinary Americans pay for what we're going to take advantage of and what we need in order to ensure that business continues to run smoothly? But the other thing I wanted to bring up is just this notion that all we need to do is get back to the pre-pandemic economy, as if the pre-pandemic economy was fantastic. And we all know, that just wasn't the case. Prior to the pandemic, the vast majority of Americans were in an incredibly precarious situation. Insane student loan debt, of course. The Federal Reserve put out that study showing that nearly 50% of Americans couldn't afford a $400 emergency. That wasn't during COVID. That was before COVID. Revolving debt, for instance, which is mostly made up of credit card debt, reached a high of $1.1 trillion. Which means that people aren't able to make do with their wages and have to charge things that they need on credit cards. I mean, the economy prior to the pandemic was a disaster. And the fact that you have people with a serious face making this point on national television or writing this up in Politico and other publications is just absolutely ridiculous. And either shows a complete disconnect from the very people that they're actually trying to write about, or more importantly, a disconnect between, or more importantly, they just intentionally are being deceptive in their reporting here.
Yeah.
But obviously, this infrastructure bill is necessary, but we want something a little more comprehensive, something bolder that actually responds to the crisis of the moment. And that crisis isn't just about the coronavirus pandemic.
No, and it's interesting, the media, like as you pointed out, just how ingrained a lot of this like this zombie ideology is. Like, they can't fathom the possibility that the government, the state, can stimulate economic activity. That's just like economic activity is a thing that happens in kind of the natural world, and the state is only a thing that can potentially hinder that natural state of things. That is not that's deeply ingrained in the media. That's taken as absolute fact. And so it's eventually something has eventually then we have to just like get past this, that this is just kind of the natural order of things. I mean, it's just, that's what we've been conditioned to believe in the last 30 or 40 years, that the economy is something separate from the state. The state can only potentially hinder that.
I mean, that's certainly the talking point. But when you look at the policies and like how, like, again, public money helps to support private industry, you'll see that that's really never been the case. And I do want to also share some sound with you guys, starting with the Fox News narrative. I mentioned Kristi Noem. She also tried to lie to the American people about who would be impacted by tax increases. So let's take a look at that and debunk it real quick.
Insanely high state and local taxes will become your new normal no matter where you live. Here with reaction, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. Governor, my analysis correct that in spite of saying that only the rich are going to pay and these evil corporations pay, I argue this will be paid for by the average American person. Doesn't matter how much you make.
That's right. You're exactly right, Sean. Every single family will pay the price for what Joe Biden's agenda is. He will drive up the cost of the food and their grocery bill. He will drive up the cost of their utilities, their gas prices, the cost of their cars, the clothes they dress their children in. Everything that they do each and every day will be more expensive. Their budgets will be tighter because they'll be earning less, and it'll be directly because of these policies and these tax increases that Joe Biden is embracing and pushing through Congress.
So none of that is going to happen. Biden calls for a corporate tax increase. Honestly, not even enough of a corporate tax increase, because he's going from 21% to 28%. Prior to Trump's tax cuts for the rich, the corporate tax rate was 35%. And when it comes to raising taxes on individuals, if you're making anything under $400,000, you will not be touched by the tax increases. At least how the proposal is put out at the moment. But it's hilarious because they're worried about their tax increases. They're worried about corporate tax increases. And to fearmonger about this as if it's going to increase the price of food and clothing for children specifically, not for adults. Adult clothing will remain the same. Clothing for your children, though, that will go up in price somehow. Yeah. It's just so stupid. It's beyond stupid that people buy into these arguments and these narratives, but they're already going out there full force. And unfortunately, Joe Biden seems ready and willing to cave to the demands of people who are looking out for corporate interests. He says debate is welcome, compromise is inevitable, changes in my plan are certain, but inaction is not an option. Not good. Not a good place to start.
Very not good. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to think really about the prospects of this bill. I mean, you know, in theory, we do need a massive trillions of dollar infrastructure bill. We absolutely need that. The size of it is going to be a huge indicator. I mean, I saw that Larry Summers came out and said that Joe Biden's plan looked about right to him. Remember, Larry Summers was hyperventilating over the the size of the coronavirus relief bill. And he was instrumental in negotiating downward Obama's response to the financial crisis. So if Larry Summers is happy with the size of this infrastructure bill, it's a good indication that it's probably not big enough. You know, that right. You could probably go twice as big and, you know, get it to the point where Larry Summers is like hyperventilating, and that's probably the correct size of the infrastructure bill.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And, you know, I just lost my train of thought. There was one other thing I wanted to bring up. But yeah, I mean, we'll see how this all plays out. But you know, on one hand, you have corporate interests who are trying to fight this as if it is the New Deal, and it's not. And then on the Democrat side, you have this talking point about how this is going to save the country. This is all we need. This is the answer we've been looking for. But you know, it certainly does not go far enough in providing the funding necessary to shift over to green energy, and that's why climate activists have, pretty much criticized that component of it, while giving Biden credit for at least being a little more focused on climate change. And I also wanted to mention, you know, we had been giving him some credit for moving away from the deficit hawk nonsense. And it seems like this proposal is moving back in the direction of freaking out or panicking about the deficit. And that worries me.
The interesting change politically to me, I mean, I do think that obviously the deficit concerns are going to come out again. They don't have the same level of oomph that they used to. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing politically for me is that they do like use some rhetorical gestures towards this, but there is no hope that there's going to be any bipartisan participation in this bill. I mean, they might say a couple things like kind of at the outset, but that was very much central to the Obama strategy, was like, we need to get Republicans no matter what. Like, we need to peel off a few of them just to say we did. And I think that has broken a little bit, even amongst like kind of awful, annoying Democrats, that they don't have any hope for Republicans getting on board. I mean, I'm seeing the reaction to John Boehner's memoir or whatever the hell he just published. People are like, see, they never really wanted to, and like it's annoying because we knew that at the time, but it just contributes more to this idea that the Republicans are just not. They're not people that you can hope to peel off by appealing to the better angels of their nature, or by giving them a few concessions here and there. That you're just negotiating against yourself at that point. So, if Biden does really commit to that strategy of not really caring if any Republicans get on board, then you start to see the seeds of some sort of change politically in the United States.